Hi, I'm Ken King, high performance basketball coach, teacher, and the owner and founder of the Boost Institute for Learning, Literacy, and Growth. Welcome to Real Learning with Real People. These are conversations with real people. They're unscripted and they're designed to pull tidbits of information from people who are grinding right now to get the most out of their lives. Using a minimum amount of editing and a maximum amount of authenticity, we want to provide lessons that anybody will find effective, relatable, and entertaining. We seek to have guests that provide learning based on their life experience. Some are chosen because of their experience as high performers in sport, business, or education, and others because I felt they have meaningful lessons to teach and I wanted to make sure they have a platform to share it with the world. The language in the videos can sometimes be mature, as I'm always encouraging my guests to be themselves. It's all part of making sure we do our best to give content that is authentic and effective, and you feel like you can utilize this real learning and connect with these real people. Today's show, we have NBA shooting coach Dave Love, but we are not going to be talking about shooting a basketball today. Instead, we're going to be focusing on having a dream that seems so far out of reach, but all the things that go into achieving that dream, the decisions, the checking the ego at the door, and really being true to yourself. Let's talk to Dave. Hey Dave, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good. Well, let's dive right in, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what's framed your attitude towards learning, how you grew up, siblings, parents, all that kind of stuff that you really feel like shaped you early on.
Yeah, I grew up in Canada, and both my parents were teachers. So I think that probably, without me realizing it too much, probably played a huge role that I was surrounded by teachers. My sister went on to is a teacher as well now, but we were a small family, just the four of us plus. My dad had a sister, and my mom was an only child, and so very small extended family as well. And my dad grew up with a small military background and was very very much a linear um, there's a right way and a wrong way kind of belief system, and grew up with that. And then as I got into my early adulthood, started uh, to change slightly away from that. I end up being very linear myself as a learner and a teacher, but I've started to realize that that's not the only way to do it, and you can go off course. I think it was surprising for my parents initially when I said that I wanted to be a basketball shooting coach. And when I said it, I only meant part-time, because I didn't think it could actually be an occupation.
Right.
That they didn't see that as a straight and narrow. That would be a cute little side thing. And fortunately, I enjoyed doing it, and um, it became something that it became my occupation. And I always had backup plan for my backup plan. That it, when I started doing what I do now, it was as a side job, and throughout the entire process of it becoming my real job, quote unquote, I had if this falls through, I have this to follow back on, and if that falls through, I have this to fall back on, just in case. And um, it was only a couple of years ago that I felt like I didn't really necessarily need the backup plans anymore. So,
Very cool. If you had to describe Dad in one word, what would that be?
oh my gosh. Can I use a phrase instead of a word?
Yeah, we can hyphenate a bunch of words to create one.
Straight and narrow.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what about Mom?
Um, Genuine. My
Awesome.
mom passed away in 2010, and just she was a bundle of nerves and anxiety and insecurity, but just came at it with like, would never harm anybody. Was always like, she was just the epitome of a mom who just loved her kids, loved everybody, and just wanted everybody to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I come from a very similar mom in that sense, very much. Everybody else's happiness is a premium to her.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting to me that A, you come from a military parent, and B, that you see that as being something that you still embody in your teaching and your learning. Because when I've worked with you, I don't see a large amount of that military style per se. I guess maybe in small pockets, but do you actively try and push back on that a little bit?
Um, I wouldn't say I actively try to. And my dad, like he wasn't in the army, he was in the militia, but I can see now as an adult that shaped who he was
Yeah.
significantly. And and as I went through my early coaching career, I look back now and I think like I was playing the role of what I thought a coach should be based on my experiences with coaches. Coaches yelled, and coaches threw temper tantrums, and I was that coach in the beginning, not all the time, but I had those moments, and then I just gradually started to, as I started to work more individually with players at a higher level, started to realize that yelling and throwing a temper tantrum when somebody is trying but not successful isn't helping the situation at all.
Yeah.
And that sometimes being supportive is more important than being demanding. And just ultimately, whoever you are, if that's who you need to be. And I'm sort of a I don't want to say I guess sweet. Like I try and be a caring guy. I try and be empathetic. I'm a softie, and a couple of my players will tease me about that. Like you're such a softie, but that is who I am. So that's who I need to be.
Right. And I think that I'm going to loop back around to that concept that you just touched on there at the end. But I also, when you talk about being having backups to backups to backups,
Mhm.
and also the concept of being a shooting coach as like it's not a, I guess, quote unquote real job.
Right,
I went through something similar when it was like I want to be a full-time basketball coach, and I still get asked what I do for work when
right,
when when I tell people that's what I do. And
yeah.
do you think that maybe the, like, really what you're talking about, having the backup to the backup to the backup, is redundancy, like having trying to fill your life with intentional redundancy so that you're always over prepared. And in my, I've researched Navy SEAL stuff quite a bit, and different military stuff. That's a big thread that occurs in military avenues or arenas. Do you think any of that comes from there? Do you remember anything like that from being a kid?
No, it was probably just a survival mode thing, as far as like knowing how my dad would react. That you could do fun things as long as you had your work done first, or um, you could have dreams, but they better be rooted in reality. And so knowing that if I did this, he would have reservations towards it. I think it just got ingrained in me that like um, have your plan, so that have your plan for his objections, and be able to answer that. And then it became less about my dad and more about a family. That now I'm 30 years old and working. At the time that I started my basketball shooting camps, I would have been working at a TV station and realizing that that was a dying industry in a certain way, and that it wouldn't lead me to the kind of lifestyle that I wanted, and that I wanted to do this other basketball thing, but didn't quite know how. Um, all these, like, I started to realize I'm going to have a family one day, and I make $30,000 a year at a TV station, and I don't know
Right.
how much that I'm always going to have to worry about being laid off, and I don't know how much, I don't know what my ceiling is uh, for maximum salary. So how am I going to live, support a family making this? So those became like the reasons for the backup plan um, down the road, and just and then dipping your toes into the NBA, and realize, okay, everybody gets fired in the NBA and
Yeah.
multiple times. So if I get fired, if I give up this opportunity, this job that I have at that point, it was a letter carrier for the post office, and that was my full-time job, and I was a basketball coach on the side. If I give up the post office to go be the Cleveland Cavaliers shooting coach, and then I'm fired after a year, and now I've got 2 kids, what will I do then? And
Right.
it's always having those ideas in the back of my mind, um, and just preparing for the worst case scenario.
Awesome. I think there's 2 key things there that I'd like to touch on. And the first is that your story in terms of working your way to being an NBA shooting coach is not one laden with, I guess, what many people would think is a typical path to coaching any aspect of the NBA. And what I
Yeah,
mean by that is that you weren't in the NBA raining down jump shots all the time,
right,
and
right,
then when you retired from playing, you got into becoming a shooting coach. Your
exactly.
story in being an NBA shooting coach starts with being a letter carrier.
Yeah. Well, it starts with being a ball boy for a minor league professional team when I was 13 years old. That
Okay.
ultimately, had I not, my mom came home from school one day and she said there was this minor league team in our hometown, or my hometown, your city, Calgary, Canada. There was a minor league team that we went to the games all the time, and we were just fans. And then one day, I think it was in grade 8, my mom came home and she said, the owner of the 88s, his wife is volunteering at the school. They're hiring ball boys. Would you like to be one? And I thought, oh my God, like I couldn't say yes fast enough.
Yeah.
And because of that job, I met the fellow who's now one of my close friends and my mentor, who without him, um, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And we knew each other before, because I was just the kid that would always go down and give high fives to the players, and he was a player on the team. And so we knew each other just from me giving him a high five every game, 5 times a game. Um, but we wouldn't have developed a friendship had I not done this volunteer position. And then because of this volunteer position, he kind of saw my work ethic and saw that I was a good person, and it kept challenging me with almost little projects that I didn't realize were projects at the time, and building my career for me. Here, go and do it. Here's your next idea. Go and try and build this. And I'd go off and try and do it. And had I not had that volunteer job, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, which is inspiring and frightening at the same time.
Well, I think it's awesome, and I think there's a few common things that I've seen woven through many of the people I've had on the show so far, especially the high performers, the people who've had a perceived or a relative level of success in whatever it is they do. One of them is that they've had some opportunity to have some freedom, or they found some opportunity to have some freedom to learn new things and try things out and fail and that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
or were encouraged to do so. And the other is that they had some kind of choice or shift a lot of the time, where it becomes that, like, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go do this.
Right.
And actually, you're the second person now. Justin Sua from the Tampa Bay Rays, who's their mental performance coach, was the other one who left broadcasting or something to do with TV, and went into something that they knew was going to be a little bit more passion fulfilling for them.
Right.
And had he described it as having a moment, and his moment happened to be when he put the microphone in front of Kobe Bryant and was interviewing Kobe, as one of the first moments that he realized, I'm not cut out for this.
Right.
Did you have any moments like that?
Um, Not that I wasn't cut out for it or anything like that, just that um, more so that it was going to be a constant. I was going to be in shift work for the rest of my life,
Right.
and worrying about being laid off. And I enjoyed the job. I loved the job, and I loved being part of a team. And I was by the end of my career in broadcasting, I was a production switcher. So in the control room, the guy pressing the buttons based on the director's instructions. And but I just didn't see a future in it, and it was prophetic, I guess, in a way, because the TV station that I work at, when I was there were probably 250 employees. I think they're down to about a dozen now.
Right.
Uh, that that industry has just completely changed. So that was more the big thing, that having the family for me. And then I just, for years leading up to me starting my shooting camps, I kept saying, like, one day I want to have my own shooting camps, but I'm like 23 years old. And I think in the back of my mind, I was waiting for somebody else to hear me say that and go, oh, I'll start them for you and you run them. Like, they were going to, like, somebody was going to jump in and create my dream for me.
Right.
And I finally realized that nobody's going to do that. If you want to do this, like you keep saying you do, you actually have to do it.
Yeah.
And I think I was about 25, 26, 27 when I finally had that moment of going, oh no, I might actually have to do the work here. So, and then I realized as I started doing it that when you're creating your own thing, the work is actually fun.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we teach at the Boost Institute, is that passion is the foundation of all learning.
Right.
And especially in 2020, where and beyond, and just a little bit before, where the content is available, no matter what content you're talking about, we can get it.
Right.
Right. And anybody can get it. And the level of passion that you bring to the content, whether it's on the teaching side or the learning side, is going to have a massive effect on how well you can perform in
Right.
that content area.
Right. Well, and to that point, I get asked, I'm in a fortunate situation where I get people asking for my advice or quote unquote mentorship of their career, and they all have the end destination in mind of where they want. I want to be a coach in the NBA, and I never had that. I wanted to be a shooting coach for 12-year-olds, and
Yeah.
my dreams grew as my career grew. And I became focused on what am I doing right now? Can I be good at this level? And then what's the next level, but never beyond that. And I think that served me really well. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's great. You're allowed to interrupt. You're the guest.
But you're not, because I'm the guest, right?
Exactly. Um, as you talk about that shift, like you could have stayed in that job, and
Yeah.
many people do. Like
Yeah.
many, that's what I don't even know if I have to argue it. I think just the majority of people would have stayed,
Yep.
because there was a massive risk there, or I guess a perceptively, some people would perceive it as a massive risk.
All kinds of different risks too. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to start something that you're not going to be good at in the beginning. Like, I
Yeah.
thought I had an area of expertise, like, because I'd been taught by this my mentor, and I didn't see anybody else doing. There were no shooting coaches in Calgary. uh, 20 years later, I still don't know how many there are. Not very many that would classify themselves as a shooting coach, and
Yeah.
not a huge number around the world. So it was like, I'm going to start something, and I might not be very good at this in the beginning, but the only way to get better at it is to do it. And so not even just stepping into a new career, but trying to do something that nobody else does and risk other people's judgments of how well you're doing in it are some of the risks that you face, but you have to face them.
Yeah. And I think you probably, just to shift what you were saying there a little bit, you thought, or you knew that you wouldn't be good at it, because you were very realistic about the fact that you wouldn't be good at it to start. Because I think that the difference, you said that you thought you might not be, but I think if you really were too overconfident on the other end of the spectrum,
Right.
where it's like, I'm definitely going to be a really good shooting coach, you would have had some pretty harsh learnings early on. So I would guess that you had a perspective that was even further realistic than you were just kind of alluding to, in the sense that it's like, I'm going to be bad first,
Right.
and then I'm going to figure it out, but I believe in myself enough that I believe that I can
Yeah.
get good.
And probably everywhere, like, different parts of my personality probably had different ends of that spectrum as well. Like, there was a part of me that thought, oh no, I'm great at this already. Like,
Right.
watch out, world. I'm I'll save everybody.
Yeah.
I did have that personality or side to the personality, as well as the what we describe like the scared, uh, insecure side as well. And I think you probably need all of that. Like you need to have enough confidence to push you over the edge to do it, and enough of the insecurity to keep you in check, to want to keep growing and learning. And I think we all need both those sides throughout our career. Even now, like I would like to think I'm probably one of the 10 best in the world at what I do, but I'm an insecure mess, and challenging myself to get better, and and trying to stay ahead of the competition as much as I can, out of those fears as well. So
That is probably one of the most impactful lines I've heard on the show so far, is that I'm probably one of the best, top 10 best in the world at what I do, who is an insecure mess and is trying to get better and trying to learn as much as
well,
possible.
and there was a great show on the Golf Channel where Hank Haynu, who at the time was Tiger Woods' swing coach, and Hank would have a season with a, uh, uh, a a celebrity of some kind who was a golf fan but not a good golfer, and would instruct them throughout the season. And you got to watch. And the first season was Charles Barkley, who, if you know anything about Charles Barkley's golf swing, it was a disaster. And Charles had a great line like this. This show, you got to see one of the best in the world teaching what he did best. And I stole drill ideas or teaching points from that show all the time. But the line that I remember best was Charles Barkley, after just playing an entire round of horrible golf shots, hits one good shot, and his confidence just goes through the roof. And he says, "I go from insecure mess to egomaniac in the blink of an eye." And I think we all kind of need that to us, or to varying degrees in certain elements. So I
Yeah,
stole that line from him.
I like that a lot, and it speaks to the balance of, and the reality of the balance of growth and fixed mindset. I just had a guest on the other day. She works with a group called Mindset Works, who work directly with Carol Dweck and all the awesome
Right,
growth and mindset
right,
stuff that they're doing. And it really is that, like, I have a fixed mindset in this area and I have a very growth mindset in this area.
right.
Sometimes they clash with each other, but the people that succeed are the ones that generally have that growth mindset kind of approach to things like you were talking about, where it's like, I'm not going to be good, I'm going to get better, and I'm going to get better by trying over and over and over again. And then my fixed mindset might play as a recording in my back in the background while I'm doing that,
Yeah.
but I'm still gonna execute my growth mindset.
So do you feel like to be successful, you need to have a little, at least a little bit of both? That it might be 10% fixed and 90% growth, or because I think the perception that you need to be 100% growth mindset. And
Right. Well, I
how,
would
how do you feel?
100% growth mindset is just an unrealistic goal. That's my first reaction every time.
Okay, so should it be our goal?
No, I think it's very similar to the concept of trying to become the best in the world at anything, which is that if I want to be the best in the world, probably my first step is to acknowledge that I'm never going to be the best in the world,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And
Steph Curry still misses over half the shots he takes.
exactly. And I'm always going to have this area at the end where I can inch myself a little more further, even when I am the best in the world.
Mhm.
Because that's going to be lightning in a bottle. I'm only going to be the best in the world if I actually am, like Steph Curry shooting, or debatably LeBron James of basketball in
Right.
general, or any moniker of things. And I do think that because we're never going to be 100% growth mindset as a person, we have to have a healthy relationship with both our mindsets.
Right.
Dr. Kendra Coates is the guest I was just mentioning from Mindset Works, and she had a great, actually she had multiple great different iterations of how to approach growth mindset. But what she described it as is like when humans thought the world was flat and we would just fall off the edge, we only built boats that would go as far as we could see. So we never built these big ships that could go really far.
Right.
As soon as it was discovered that we could go further and that there wasn't an edge, we started to build boats that and ships that could go way further than we ever thought possible, and maybe so far that we don't even know how far they'll need to go.
Okay.
And so the relationship that she described with growth mindset that I thought was really profound is that we need to start building generations now where we almost don't even really teach that much fixed mindset anymore. We just teach, and maybe we start trying to peel the labels off of it. We just start teaching like myelination and constant learning and constant growth and that kind of thing. That is the norm. Just like it went from being, well, we could only sail a kilometer, or for anybody in America watching this, a little less than a mile off the shore, to now we need to start teaching everybody that they can sail as far as they possibly want as long as they approach it that way.
Outstanding.
So yeah, I do think it's understanding that you need to make mistakes to succeed, and that there's going to be a lot more moments where your physiological reaction is going to push you towards what we call a fixed mindset. But we can take the term fixed mindset totally out of it, and we can just say your body, your brain, your physiology is going to challenge you in your mindset all the time, but you should invite that and want to pursue that, and continue to be willing to fail as you lean into that concept.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
You said something earlier on about you're sometimes referred to as a softie as a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's something that's can really speak to a lot of people in leadership, not just in sport, but in other areas as well, because it's not that hard to put a negative connotation on that.
Right.
But I don't think that that's how you see it.
And in this profession, it's probably viewed as a negative.
Yeah, but I don't think you see it that way.
No, it totally. I think it's incorrect to view it as a negative, although there are probably a lot of people who do. Um, you can be a soft, caring, empathetic person, but still inspire and hold accountable. And I can be soft and understand that changing habits is difficult. I can be empathetic of that while still demanding that we relentlessly work to change the habit.
Right.
I can do both, um, and that's just my personality. My personality, where uh, I tend to lean to the empathetic side. I would be a horrible judge in a jury situation because I can see both sides equally, and I'd never be able to make a decision. But in this profession, I think it suits me well to just say, like, some of the best moments I have are when players turn to me and say, "This is really hard," and my reaction is, "I know, right? Like, it is hard,"
Yeah.
and like, but we have a choice now. We can say this is hard, and we can give up and settle for where we are, or we can go, "Oh yeah, this is really, really hard. Crap, this is going to be a lot of work. Okay, let's do the work and
Yeah.
get better." And you can, like that. Those are conversations that I have on an ongoing basis. Oh my God, this is hard. I know, so hard. Keep working. Doing great.
Yeah.
We're not
Well,
there yet, but if we keep working, we will get there. And to me, that's being a softie, but also just staying the course and being patient with the process.
yeah, and I think there's a bigger and bigger reality in leadership now, which is that we have to lead in the way that is most effective for the people that we're leading to be led.
Right.
And in my anecdotal opinion, a militaristic, my way or the highway, black or white, or as you said, linear style, it's not that there's no place for it, but it is going to become and continue to become less and less effective, in my experience at least, given the way that the athletes, the students, and many of the learners are coming to us.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think that term of softy, or um, like a laissez-faire style, or however you want to refer to it, whatever label we want to put on it for the purpose of conversation, it is going, the negative connotation is going to get peeled back from that more and more as we go, because it's going to become a requirement. I think it's not going to become, it is a requirement now in terms of being able to lead effectively.
Well, and I think too, in at least in my form of leadership, which is I'm supposed to know what you need to do to get where you want to be. Um, if if I know that it's hard, but I won't acknowledge that it's difficult to you, then those two ideas, they don't work together. If I'm supposed to know that this is difficult for you and I won't acknowledge it and say, oh, yeah, this is really uncomfortable, this is
Yeah.
strange, this feels weird, you're right. If I can't acknowledge that, then I'm lying to the person.
Yeah.
And my job is then to say, you're right, it's uncomfortable because you haven't done this before. So let's just do it a lot. It will become comfortable, and show them the path that here's where you are in the moment. Here's what you're feeling emotionally and physically in that moment. But here's the direction that we need to go, and the beliefs that we need to have to in order to get there. And ultimately, that's my job, is to show them how to get to where they want to be.
Right. And when you're doing that, and I love talking to, so there's a podcast I listen to, it's by a guy, his name's Dr. Michael Gervais, and it's called Finding Mastery. And he talks to some, and don't get me wrong, like this is built similarly to his format, but he talks to what he describes as the tip of the arrow people.
Okay.
So people who are at the cutting edge, the front side of their field, Navy SEALs, elite athletes, researchers, business people, that kind of thing, who are at the very tip. And because of that, there's a lot of learning there. And in this channel, what I'm trying to capture is maybe not everybody who's at the tip, not every guest is at the tip of that arrow, but the people that are definitely on the arrow and advancing constantly. And when I talk to someone like you who works with the highest level of athlete in our sport and in the world, um, I love to get the perspective of what you see each day, and be able to share that, especially with younger kids as they're trying to come up. Because, and I'll give you the context. The context is that if I'm 12 and I go on my phone or I go online or watch TV, it looks to me like every one of those guys wants it, and every one of those women want it every day, day in and day out. They want to be in the gym lifting, and they want that shooting coach to come in and break their shot down with them, and their motivation to do that stuff is endless and completely intrinsic. What's your experience with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That there's a perception out there that, um, just to paint the other side of it, and I'll circle back around, there is a perception, and I hate that this is out there, that NBA players have massive egos and they don't work
Right.
hard. Yes, they have massive ego, and they have also massive talent to match. And when your ego is here and your talent is there, those things line up and they work together. The problem is when your ego is here and your talent is there. That's when we
Right.
get into trouble. And that tends to be the 12-year-old boy, if I can make a vast generalization, that they had the massive ego too, but not the talent to back it up. And that's where it becomes a problem. So they put that on the elite athletes and say, like, oh, they're not coachable. NBA players are the most coachable players that I work with, and with uh, every step up in level, players generally tend to be more coachable. High school players are better to work with than middle school players. College players are better than high school players to work with.
Right.
Pros are better than. There are exceptions to that rule, but that, in my experience, tends to be the case. And what the reason I think it happens that way is you need to have that to be to get to that level. You need to have that coach, the combination of the ability and the God-given talent and everything else, uh, plus the coachability allows you to be in the top 1% of the 1%.
Right.
If you don't, you end up just in the top 1%, but not the 1% of the 1%. And so the examples that I usually give are in the NBA, we have um, maybe one day a month that is an off day, a non-practice or a non-game day in season. So usually it comes after a back-to-back. If you play a game on a Tuesday night and a Wednesday night, 2 games back-to-back, usually Thursday will be a day off. My first year in the NBA, we had a day off, and I thought it was a day off. And so I realized, I forgot my running shoes or something. I went into the facility to go grab my running shoes, and there were 4 players in the gym. And this is our one day off per month. And there were 4 guys there, and you find out, these other 6 have either been here already or are coming in later today. And you're going, crap, like 80% of our team is coming in on an off day.
Yeah.
That is the reality. Not for any other reason than they just have this drive. Like, to be in the top 1% of the 1%, you have to have I don't care if this is a day off. This is what I love doing. I need to get better. I have the drive to get, like, all those things have to come together to get you out of bed and in the gym on the day off. And when I worked for the Orlando Magic, in addition to an off day, we would have, 80% of our guys coming in on an off day. We would then have to institute lockout days where we physically locked the doors to the gym.
Coach
and said,
Carter.
if you're injured, you can get treatment, but you are not allowed to shoot. And so we would have maybe 2 or 3 of those per season of just, don't even come in. We will actively turn you away. We want you to have a life. And I'm sure half of our guys would go find a private gym somewhere and work out anyways.
Yeah.
That's where you need to be if you want to be 1% of 1%. And you can't fake that. You can't pretend to be that guy. You either are or you aren't. And if you are, you have a better chance of getting to where these guys get to.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And to be really specific, just because they're doing it, if we talk just about motivation and emotion around that, just because they are getting in to do it does not mean that they woke up that day wanting to do that. For, like, there's other things that they would also love to do instead.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the big pieces too for young athletes, where it's like, I'm never going to be that good because I don't wake up every day wanting to go work out, or I don't wake up every day wanting to get coached on my shot. But they don't either.
Yeah.
But they do it still.
Or they surround themselves with people and make it those people's obligation to, like, it's your job to get me to do it. Even when I don't want to do it, it's your job to still make me do it anyways. I had a similar experience to you, where I graduated high school and went to Mount Royal College at the time to see about trying out for the basketball team. I think in the back of my mind, not knowing that I wasn't good enough anyways, but I walked into the meeting and they sort of laid out the schedule of what this would look like. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I love basketball, but not that much. Yeah. Like, I'm not scaling back to 3 courses just so I have time to do weight room and dry line training and practice and individual workouts and this and this and this and film and in the back of my mind, I know I'm not going to play. Like, best I'm going to sit at the end of the bench and play 4 minutes a season. Like, that's too much work. I didn't have that to be the player, and that's fine. But if that's how you feel, then you're not entitled to be the 1% of the 1%.
Yeah, and I think what you kind of hit on there was really important, in that you didn't love basketball that much in that way.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like you do love it, probably more than a lot of people who were in that room, but in your way. And
I was more than happy a few years later to go drive across the city to work with a 12-year-old girl in her driveway for an hour and make $15, which probably paid for my gas, and drive all the way back across the city. Like, I loved it enough to do that.
Yeah.
What I discovered is I love coaching more than especially at this point in my life where I'd break if I got on the floor. Um, that I like this part of what I do. So find whatever it is, and I say this in camps that I run for youth players all the. You don't have to love shooting this much. You don't have to love basketball, but take these ideas and apply them to the violin or apply them to mathematics. If you're thinking these basketball drills are boring and you wish you were doing your math homework right now, then you just got really good feedback that mathematics might be the direction you should be going, and just like chase the thing that you love and that you're passionate about, because that's the only way you're going to be willing to work hard enough to get to an elite level in anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's super interesting how many times we have a hard time knowing exactly where we fall in that love for something.
Right.
And Ron Watilla, who
Yeah.
talked a lot on
He's
here.
the best.
Yeah,
He's the
absolutely. He spoke about really knowing who you are on his episode, and really, I can't lead others if I don't really have a good understanding of who I am. And you've done a really good job, especially in my relationships with different coaches and different individual skill coaches and stuff like that. You still know exactly what your lane is.
Yeah.
Like you don't come in and while you're working with someone on shooting, be like, I don't know if you've noticed, but part of the reason why he or she can't shoot that well is because your offense is kind of whack.
Right.
Like
Right. Yeah.
you're not. Yeah, and that I think in and of itself is rare, and I think it takes a large amount of self-actualization and understanding of who you are as a person to be able to stay in that lane and not deviate.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough where like that's been a conscious decision, where I early on in my career as a shooting coach thought maybe I should start to focus on more broader skills and be what's now sort of a skills trainer, a general skills trainer. And I just found I didn't like it as much.
Yeah.
Like I liked the shooting aspect, so I just chased what I like, and I think it is a skill to be able to say, I don't know, what do you think? Or I'm not great at that. And my mentor has ties to Duke University and was in the he wasn't recruited by the famous Coach K of Duke University, but was on the team the first year that Coach K played or coached Duke. And he will tell all the time, like Coach K, probably one of the three greatest basketball coaches of all time, would say, like, I don't know shooting. I don't teach shooting well.
Right.
And you need to have that security to say, like, I'm good at what I do, but that doesn't mean I know everything. And I'm really good at my niche. And fortunately, there aren't a lot of people who want to be that specific and want to dive that deep into just this one small part of the game. They want to kind of do everything. And most people aspire to be a head coach, and that's great, but that's not what I want to do. And so fortunately, there is a market for the niche, and there may not be in all cases, where you may have a niche but not a market. And I don't know what you do at that point, but I've been lucky enough that there is.
Absolutely. And when you were talking about your work with NBA athletes, you talked about ego and the not only the fact that they have it, but really the requirement of it.
Yeah.
And we teach a lot in our stuff about, kind of like we said, about softness or being a softie as a coach. Ego has no connotation. That's one of the things that we try to teach a little bit with young kids, is that we all have ego.
Mm-hmm.
Ego is a part of our psyche. And you can have a positive ego and or you can send your ego to a positive end, you can send your ego to a negative end, and it can also be perceived as as either end of the spectrum. But if somebody looks at you and says, well, you have an ego, well, it's like, yeah, so do you. Like
Right.
we all have it.
Right.
But it's like, if it's like, wow, you have a really inflated ego
Right.
compared to where you're capable, now we have a problem. Or
Yeah.
hey, you deserve, like, one of the things that we do, I work with some cheerleaders, and they vary in ages. So the cheerleaders will be um, all the way from 12 up to 18, 19, 20, 20, like adult cheerleaders. And one of the things that we teach a lot in that sport, and mind you, it's a sport that is 100% based on how you look and act in a lightning in a bottle
Right.
situation. Like,
Right.
they're literally judged on appearance. They're like that kind of stuff. And by the way, just as a total tangent, they are some of the best athletes I've ever worked with.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's scary how athletic some of these kids are, not to mention the adults, and
Yeah.
strong and explosive and that kind of thing. So anybody
I
watching
would
this who,
just to take a tangent on your tangent,
yeah,
if I can.
yeah,
I love watching people who are really good practice. And some of my favorite moments in the NBA would be pregame warmups. A player and I, we would meet before the whole rest of the team even got in the arena, and we'd start our warm up while the cheerleaders were still on the floor. And I was fascinated to watch the dance crew, the cheerleaders, or whatever you want to call them,
yeah,
rehearse and listen to how much precision there was in that. Or my wife and I, we would watch Dancing with the Stars more so years ago. My wife liked watching the performances. I liked watching the practice. And
right,
she'd always want to fast forward through the practice. I'd want to fast forward through I don't care about the performance. Show me what they're working on. Those are the things I found interesting. Sorry to
no,
tangent.
that's good.
Do you remember what the original point was now?
Totally, yep.
Yeah.
um
This isn't with cheerleaders.
Now I'll go tangent to your tangent's tangent.
Let's do this.
I did a much smaller version of a Dancing with the Stars. I ended up dancing. I trained with a professional for 6 months. I ended up not having to. I chose to dance in a competition in front of, I think, 800 people or something like that.
Ooh,
And I don't know if you can tell by knowing me, looking at me, my 6'5" build and anything like that, that I'm not
you don't scream
an
dance.
adept dancer. Yeah, like, it was outside my comfort zone.
Okay.
And I learned more from my dance instructor. Shout out to Jenna. Um, and in that experience than I've ever really learned in a lot of other stuff, because the attitude that she took to the training and the practice was so growth oriented and so productive that way, that my learning about how to be a coach and a teacher from how she did it, and my learning about how to learn was happening tenfold to a lot of other situations I've been in.
I try and put myself in situations all the time, or as often as I can, where when I go to the golf driving range, I try and take I try and practice near somebody else taking a lesson, so I can just listen in on how they're coached. And sometimes you learn like a great way of saying something, and sometimes you just learn what not to do. Um, and I try and remind, like I took tennis lessons a little while ago, and just to remember what it's like to be the player
Yeah,
and how frustrating it can be in certain situations. And I think that's important for us as coaches to keep putting ourselves on the other side of the equation at times, so that we remember what it's like to be there.
yeah. That, whatever you call it, whether it's white belt mentality or childlike approach or anything like that, I think reminding ourselves that we need to be in that situation periodically or often
Yeah.
is good. Um, Looping all the way back through our three tangents now.
Forever.
Working,
We've done it before.
yeah. Working with the cheerleaders, we talk about ego, and we talk about it in the context of using it as a coach or as a teammate for an opportunity to have some really genuine and deep conversation on both sides of the spectrum. So it's easy to tell someone, maybe it's not easy to tell them, but it's easy to identify moments where somebody's ego should not be as big about something as it is, or
Hmm.
that it's overinflated. I
Right.
think every human, every one of the 7 billion plus people on the planet can identify too big of ego.
Right.
But one of the most powerful teachings that we can have, and this happens a lot in that sport, is telling someone that their ego is not big enough.
Right.
Right, where it's like I'll never forget the first time I pulled an athlete aside. She's 15-year-old athlete. She's probably 18, 19 now, still competing in cheerleading. And I said to her, you deserve to have a much bigger ego about that than you have.
Right.
Like when we're getting to this tumbling part and you're really getting nervous because you don't feel like it's something that you're good enough at right now. Great kind of growth mindset tendency, but you're actually pretty friggin' good at it.
Yeah.
And somebody needs to let you know that you're the best in this gym at this skill right now, and you deserve to have a bigger ego about that. And
Right.
that can be really powerful on the
Oh,
other end.
yeah. Like outrageously powerful, where that moment could potentially change her life. Like she'll be a 60-year-old woman and still remember the conversation that you had with her, and that could be a life and defining moment. And I guess as coaches, we need to be aware of that, that our words are really, really powerful and
Yeah.
could be detrimental if we're not careful, and could be like, why not have that moment? Like, why wouldn't you compliment somebody? I had a moment. I worked for the Phoenix Suns as my first NBA job, and Steve Kerr, who's now the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, and I think he won 7 NBA championships as a player. Don't quote me on that number. It's a high number anyways.
Yeah.
One of the greatest shooters ever, one of the best people ever. He was the GM in Phoenix. He was the person that hired me. And I was sitting in his office after a workout with the player that I was hired to work with. And I said, I have to be careful sometimes because I want to compliment Lou because he's doing so well, but I don't want to compliment him too much. And he says, no, we should all be complimenting people all the time if they've earned them.
Yeah.
Like, and that stuck with me, that like, if you earn the compliment, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
But if you don't earn it, I'm not going to give it to you then. I have to be honest. So.
Yeah, the difference between false positive feedback or false positive influence and genuine authentic positive feedback can be massive,
Right.
because I think then that's where we get into this area where now the ego does not reflect the ability,
Right.
and not giving that positive feedback when it's deserved, the ego falls far below the ability
Yeah.
in terms of its relationship, and giving that positive feedback when it's undeserved, the ego starts to rise above. And that I think it would be a great lesson for a lot of parents. And
Yeah.
I'm not a parent, so I'm speaking outside of my world of expertise, and probably something that I have a right to talk a lot about. But the relationship between giving positive enforcement, positive feedback, positive criticism, and where their abilities are is extremely important.
Yeah. Well,
And
and my oldest daughter is a soccer player, and she's a good soccer player, but not elite by any stretch of the imagination. And we're at a point where we can say to her as a 13-year-old, wasn't your best game.
right.
Like, with no judgment, like, just, and we've had the conversation enough over and over and over again that we're not mad when we say that. And she understands that if you can have your best game, like that's the best game you've ever played, then by theory, you can have your worst
Yeah.
and a whole lot of places in between. And that's the reality, that, okay, that wasn't your best, which is my polite way of saying, you didn't play very well, and that's okay. Tomorrow we'll play better. Do you have any idea what you did? Like, why? Yeah, okay, perfect. Work on it tomorrow. Get better.
Yeah. And just like the difference between an NBA or a professional level athlete and an amateur athlete, understanding that both days there is an opportunity for more growth.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you just had your best game. Do you just, okay, I'm done with soccer?
Right. Right.
I did
Well,
it.
yeah. Exactly. Now, can you do it again? And I love golf for that reason, where like you can play the best round of your life, and then the next round, like, or you can have the greatest warm up of your life and just think, oh my God, I'm like I can't wait to see, and then play terribly.
Yeah. Have you ever read Golf in the Kingdom?
No, no,
So
I've never heard of it. Good.
yeah, it's by a guy named Michael Murphy, and he created this place called the Esalen Institute. And without going really far into that, um, everything I just said is super cool. He's got a couple of really great books, but Golf in the Kingdoms I found was a really profound teaching and coaching book for me, and it's a good read. It's one of those reads, kind of like The Alchemist and stuff like that, where it's timeless. You can reread it. I've always referred to The Alchemist as like the Mona Lisa of books, because every time I open it, I read it with a different lens, and it speaks
Right.
to me differently.
Right. Amazing.
Golf in the Kingdom is very similar that way,
Okay.
and it's obviously centered around golf, and it just has some really interesting coaching and feedback and leadership and motivation and all those kind of stuff, techniques, without being explicit. Like, it's fiction, but it's very, very profound in how it speaks to coaching and leadership.
What other great books have shaped you?
Oh, that's one of my questions for you. That's usually how I end these things.
Right,
But no, let's go there. I think Phil Jackson's, I'm blanking on the name of it now.
It's like a Western, like a sort of a desert landscape on the.
Yeah. And the basketball people watching this are gonna be like, these guys suck. Like, how do you not remember that book? But yes, that's exactly the one I'm thinking of. And actually, every Phil Jackson one I've read has been pretty good. Sacred Hoops. That's what it's called. That's the Phil Jackson one. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I'm glad. Got my
Right. You're
back to legitimacy here. Like I said, The Alchemist. There's The 5 People You'll Meet in Heaven.
Okay.
Is also really, really good. I don't think I can have a learning YouTube channel or podcast or anything like that without mentioning Dweck's mindset book.
Okay.
I think that was, and then I have, and like there's a couple just kind of around here. I have multiple versions of Schmidt's motor learning textbooks,
okay,
which are super, super interesting, just in terms of how we literally acquire skills and learn and that kind of thing. So I'll bounce that back at you. What about you?
There's two that kind of jump to mind. One is so dry, but it shaped me as a coach more so that it gave me terminology to what I was already doing, but kind of questioning myself. It's Doug Lemov, and it's either practice perfect or perfect practice. So I can never remember which way it goes, and I keep confusing myself on whether it's practice perfect or perfect practice. But it's centered around teaching teachers how to teach better. And but it directly applies to me and what I do and the players that I'm working with. That in some ways I'm the teacher, and in some ways the player is the student that's the teacher. So it hits on a lot of different levels, and just everything I teach as far as isolating skills and adding the layers, all that terminology came from that book, and I directly stole it from Doug. But then it gave me the confidence to say, like, oh my God, this is what I've just kind of like spent 15 years figuring out as my best way of teaching this skill. And the second one, I got this recommendation from assistant GM for the Orlando Magic named Matt Lloyd. It's a baseball book about two baseball analytics writers who kept saying, wouldn't it be awesome if we could be GMs of a team? And like put into practice all these things from the baseball analytics standpoint that we think people should be doing, like actually do them and see what happens. And a minor league team, like low minor league team, comes to them and says, like, you can be the co-GMs of our team next year. And so they wrote about them running this team, and they alternate chapters between person A will write the first chapter, person B the second, and so on. In case you didn't know what alternate means, I just explained to you.
Oh, yeah. Real learning.
Really advanced concept that I've just figured out. But what I got out of it was these two guys who feel totally insecure that they don't belong in this world of professional baseball players because they're computer nerds, and they became nicknamed the corduroy crew because they wore corduroy pants, and just how they dealt with their emotions and their insecurities and everything else, and then the confidence that came with. They started to do some real. They shifted on every play, like they had it, and
Right.
they had their closer come in the sixth inning, and their starter come in the seventh, and all these different like weird ideas that people have talked about, but nobody's had the courage to do. They did them,
Yeah.
and first half of the year they were unbelievable, and then they got cherry picked. The best players got called up to different teams, and they had to deal with that. But it's a fascinating book to read. As if you're a coach that maybe doesn't feel like they belong in the situation that they're in, then give that one a read. And I did give the title. It's
I was
called
going to say,
The Only Rule Is It Has to Work. I forget who the two authors are, but the title of the book I even love. The Only Rule Is It Has to Work.
well, and that's I'm definitely going to check that one out because one of my favorite movies of all time is Moneyball.
Yeah, so good.
Um, for that exact same reason. And I think all of us, in regardless of the level that we lead, coach, teach, whatever, at, we have these moments of imposter syndrome where it's like, I'm faking it, I'm a
Yeah,
fraud,
yeah,
that kind of stuff. And you mentioned how the perfect practice slash practice perfect, whatever the title is, how that really kind of gave you some stuff where it's like, I'm doing this, and
right,
that like now it's now I feel vindicated almost,
right,
and
right.
that
Because I've got everybody on social media who's better at my job than me, the
yeah.
guy actually doing it.
Oh, and so like
Not afraid to tell you.
totally, and I see those people in your field as a coach, like a team coach, I guess would be how I would describe myself. It's all over the place in that field too. You get it to your face, you get it in email, you get it in text message, and then not just in coaching and teaching as well. I feel terrible for some teachers now, and all these armchair teachers, um, who oftentimes are probably parents, who think they can do it better,
Yeah.
and because of that, one of the things, and I think this is actually probably one of the great places to kind of wrap it up, just because it touches on almost everything, is that we as in leadership positions oftentimes struggle with this imposter syndrome a lot.
Hmm.
There's a million different reasons why we feel that way, um, and when we finally have that moment where it's like somebody who you trust, whether it's a book or a person or um, a movie or anything like that, vindicates you
Yeah.
and says like, hey, what you're doing is bang on, or keep doing it, or they just happen to be like, well, I'm an NBA coach, Ken, and this is how I teach it, and in my head it's like, oh man, that's exactly how I teach it, and you're just kind of like, yeah, okay, fist pump.
Right.
There's a difference there, I think, between being like, oh well, if that's how they're doing it, that's how I do it, so I should be there. I
Right.
think there's an attitude difference
Yeah. And ultimately, when I have those moments of insecurity or imposter syndrome, what I need to hold myself accountable to and what I fall back on when I have those moments is results. How do I know I was right? The player I worked with got better.
there.
Now we can argue that if you had worked with the same player, and you had done something totally different, they would have improved even more than what I did. But we'll never know.
Yeah,
Like, I actually got results. You believe that you think you could if given the opportunity, and those are two dramatically different things. So hold
absolutely.
yourself accountable to getting results, and if you get them, then what you did was right.
Totally. And I always say that if you want a true picture of what I've done, good or bad,
Yeah.
speak to the people that I've taught or coached or that kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, there are athletes who will be like, yeah, he was terrible. And in that moment, I might very well be like, yeah, I was bad at that point.
Right.
Like I,
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't disagree with you, but I do agree that you you need to have that measurability,
Yeah.
that understanding of the outcome. Doesn't mean that the outcome is everything, doesn't mean that it's the only thing by any means, but understanding it is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. If people want to follow along with you and keep up with your stuff or check out your stuff, if there's basketball people watching this who want to either work with you or learn from you, where can they do that?
A couple of different places on social media at Coach Dave Love. Twitter and Instagram being the ones I use the most. And then a website, coachdavelove.com as well would be the best two ways. So just really search Coach Dave Love and you'll be directed somewhere that's good.
Awesome. And if you could articulate for me in a
Wonderful.
phrase or two, um, and you don't need to rush into it because I've had a few people really think about it, but for some it's easy. In a phrase or two, what's the best advice you can give on learning and getting better at anything? Just learning in general, best advice.
I'm going to take from how I physically coach basketball. Whatever the problem is, isolate it, learn to do it differently, and then build layers to learn to apply the new habit that you've learned in more difficult environments.
Cool. That's good. That's really concise. See, you thought you were gonna have a hard time with the question,
I
and
know that's
yeah,
the most articulate thing I've said in an hour.
you had it locked and loaded. Okay, Dave. Well, I really appreciate the insight. I think you did a killer job of giving us some perspective from the top end of the people that you're working with, and I love hearing how your story your story's really evolved, and I think that this is really why I'm doing this, is that when you take people that were at one point doing what the majority would do, and at some point they diverged and they started doing it because of their passion. I think
Yeah,
that's where we have really good conversations, and I have a lot of respect for you for doing it that way.
I
And
appreciate that. Thank you so much for being interested and for doing what you're doing. That was a lot of fun chatting with you.
yeah, cool. Well, thanks. We'll talk again soon.
Sounds good, bud. Thanks.